Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Daniel Levine, and I am the artistic director here at ACT of Connecticut. And this is our second community talkback that we have planned for this production of Nickel Mines, and we're so thrilled that you stayed after the show to experience this talkback. Now, when Nickel Mines was given to me, I read it, I reread it, I read it again, and it stuck with me. I thought it was an innovative, unique, interesting, emotional, and important new show that deserve to be seen and developed.
Memories I keep close to my chest. Their name I speak with every breath. We will be together once again until then.
But I was not sure that it was the right show for our audiences here at ACT. And about a month or so later, there was another school shooting. And that's when I made the decision. And that's where I made the decision that we were going to produce this show. We had to produce this show. And thanks to an amazing, generous Ridgefield resident, Anita D'Onofrio, who was joining us via Zoom right there. Thanks to Anita D'Onofrio, yes. We were able to include Nickel Mines in this season. Anita has worked for years on gun reform. ACT of Connecticut and Anita D'Onofrio are so proud that we have taken on Nickel Mines, and we hope that our production that you saw today not only affects our audiences, but also brings attention to this new musical so that other theaters and venues will also produce and present this show in the future. Now, as you saw when watching the show today, Nickel Mines serves as an interesting entry point to a conversation on faith, forgiveness, community, gun violence, grief, and justice. And because of the sensitive subject matter, we at ACT decided to create these community talkbacks. We think that it is important and interesting for our audiences to not only understand how a production comes to be, but also to have a conversation about the many poignant topics that this show covers. Today's panelists include Andrew Palermo, Nero Feliciano, Carol Malstead, and Alexis Kukos. Thank you for being here, all of you. I'd like to tell our audiences a little bit about each of our panelists today, starting with Nickel Mines creator and director, Andrew Palermo. Andrew, sure, clap. Andrew has an extensive career in the theater as a performer, choreographer, and creator. He made his Broadway debut as a choreographer with the musical Allegiance in 2015. In 2018, with the support by the U.S. Department of State, Andrew was commissioned by Moscow State Ballet Theater to create a production that played the Kremlin, Moscow's Pushkin Theater, and is now a part of the touring repertoire of the 65-member dance company. His movement workshops for children on the spectrum have been taught to students and caregivers around the country and abroad. Andrew is an alumni of University of Cincinnati, CCM, and on faculty at UC Irvine. Please welcome Andrew Palermo. My friend Nero Feliciano. Nero is a cognitive psychotherapist who has specialized in treating anxiety for the last 16 years. She is the author of the Psychology Today blog, The Good Enough Life, and podcast host of All Things Life, a weekly show on mental, emotional, and spiritual wellness. Nero has been a featured expert on Today.com, NBC.com, Today's Parent, and frequently comments on parenting and relationships for Parents magazine. Her first book, This Book Won't Make You Happy, that's the title of the book, will be released on April 5th. Nero lives in Ridgefield and is a proud mother of 4 and wife of 18 years. Please welcome Nero. My friend Carol Malstead. Carol is a clinical psychologist and psychoanalyst with a private practice here in Ridgefield, Connecticut. Carol specializes in the treatment of loss, grief, and complicated mourning, as well as mood disorders, anxiety, and trauma. In her nearly 30 years of practice with children, teens, and adults, she has learned that empathy and compassion are essential components in the process of forgiveness, which is usually a journey with many twists and turns, but that in the end, the victim often experiences a sense of peace, acceptance, and even freedom. Please welcome Carol Malstead. And Alexis Kukos. Alexis serves as the Chief Operating Officer of the Jesse Lewis Choose Love movement, an educational not-for-profit dedicated to helping children and adults manage their emotions, be resilient, and have healthy relationships through next-generation character, social, and emotional development programming. Combining her passions of educational equity and better society through compassion-based learning, Alexis aspires to extend these practices into higher education, reaching the next generation of leaders, inspiring them to lead with love and compassion. She's currently pursuing a master's in education at University of Pennsylvania. Please welcome Alexis. Now, I have prepared some questions for our panelists to start the conversation, but audience, please do feel free to raise your hand anytime you want during today's talkback, and we can certainly involve you in the community discussion. We will also leave some time at the end for audience questions as well. So let's start with the show's creator and director, Andrew Palermo. Andrew, can you talk to us a little bit about the creation of the show? Why this story? Why Nickel Mines? And what was your developmental process like?
I saw a CNN story in 2013 about the happening, which is what the Amish call the shooting. And my first reaction was, oh, yeah, I kind of remember that. And I did not like that was my reaction. I felt like I should remember it clear as day, right? So that was the first thing. Secondly, as the show, what we really focus on is the forgiveness element that the Amish practice and how extraordinary it is and how unusual and sort of all-encompassing that forgiveness is. So that was step 2. And then step 3 is the Amish culture is, they live amongst us, but they're not the same as us, and they refer to us as English. And there's just a lot of sort of, I don't know, my co-author Shannon Stokey and I are kind of fascinated by those kind of culture clashes that live, amongst each other. And that can be theatrical and can work on stage and things like that. So as Dan said originally, this is the first full-fledged professional production, and we're just thrilled to be here to have you all see it and share it.
Thanks, Andrew. Carol, first of all, as a therapist specializing in this, what was your experience witnessing the show today?
Oh, well, I could barely talk. It was so profound, and I think there was loss and grief experienced on so many different levels. Just thinking about Charles's wife, she lost her husband, she lost the father of her children. She also then lost a belief in who her husband was, right? And then who the husband he became after he killed those girls. So that's just one example. There's just layers and layers. And Charles, the shooter, had actually lost a baby 20 years prior. Right. And so one wonders what he was reenacting in taking the lives of other young girls, right? Mm-hmm. And then there are all those families, of course, who lost their children, and siblings lost their siblings, and
yeah, so, complicated.
It's complicated.
With lots of loss. And for me, when I first got the script, like I said, I read it, reread it, and I it's just stuck with me. I never thought about and all, we hear about shootings, sadly, every week, right? And I never thought about the family of the shooter. I just never did, in any of it. Like when I hear, last week I heard something, and it just doesn't go to, it's not where my brain goes. But it is interesting that you included this, Andrew, and I think really important, because actually the truth is, and I'll get back to you, Carol, in a second, but talk a little bit, Andrew, about the reality of his mother and actually what she wrote an amazing book, and talk about the brother as well.
Yeah, so with the exception of Samuel, the guy who plays the guitar, Morgan Hollingsworth, he's been with the show from the beginning, he and the deacon, the guy who plays his father, those are the only 2 fictional characters in the show. Every other character is either one of the casualties or the survivors or the families, and we did not change their names. Same with the family. We're using the real names for now. That's how it's been up until this point. In looking at how we were going to build this show, we felt like a sort of spectrum approach was going to be the best way to go at it. And it's obviously not linear, and we really look at the the happening and the aftermath from all these different angles. And it just felt right to include the angle of the shooter's family, because that is real. That is the truth. You can't ignore it. How you spotlight that or not is obviously up to artistic, license and all that stuff. But for us, telling the story of his wife and his mother was important, and I think beautifully played by our actresses who do, Kelsey and Hannah. Just a strange kind of anecdote about the family in general. When we were doing the show at the festival in the city, I got a Facebook message in the middle of the run from the shooter's brother. When I dropped my phone when I saw it. But he said he had heard about the show from his mom, Terry, who's a big role in the show as well, the woman who takes care of Roseanne in the wheelchair. And he said he wanted to come see it, and he was going to bring an autographed copy of his mom's book about the happening. He was so gracious. I met him after the show, so grateful, and thanked us heartily for paying tribute to his family as well, not dragging them through the mud. And it really made us feel like, okay, like we're doing right by hopefully everybody involved. That's our goal, right? That this whole thing is a tribute to everybody affected, and hopefully to regarding other shootings as well. And again, that family is just as much victims of this situation as the victims' families.
Carol, back to you. Sorry to interrupt.
That's okay.
In your bio, you say that you have learned that empathy and compassion are essential components in the process of forgiveness, and that in the end, the victim often experiences a sense of peace, acceptance, and even freedom. Now, I would imagine that everyone's grief process is a little bit different, and that the process is an ever-changing and evolving one as time passes. Can you talk a little bit about what it means to have empathy and compassion, and how forgiveness can, for some, be healing for the victim or survivor?
So I think if you boil it all down, we're all more human than otherwise, right? And when we can accept the fact that we are fallible, that we make mistakes, that we hurt others, we can really do a deep dive into that, then we can also forgive others for their mistakes, right? Because we're all human, and we all love, and we all hate, and we all grieve, and we all get angry, but holding on to anger or resentment, which is anger that we don't let go of, really just poisons the well forever sometimes, right? And it's not useful. So when we can let go of the anger, anger is, in my view, a second feeling. It's a feeling that comes after a first feeling. Hurt, anxiety, fear, trauma, shame, humiliation. When we can address those feelings, we can then let go of the anger, right? And then we can move on.
That can't be easy.
No, it's a lifelong journey, right?
I'm just curious, how does one start? How do you even go there? How does one start that process?
I think you just let yourself feel. You let yourself talk and express feelings. You let yourself be angry. You let yourself hate. You let yourself, feel the loss. In terms of trauma and sudden deaths, I think it's easier for people sometimes to be mad than to be sad. So they will hold on to that anger. The other thing that's important to bring into this, and it was very much a layer of the show, was how your assumptive world changes when there's a sudden death or a trauma. Your assumptions that the world is good, that God will take care of you, that good things don't happen to bad people, gets just totally shattered, right? And all of that has to be reworked.
For most of us, at least my age, my oldest is a freshman in high school. This has been the normal in raising kids in the school system. So it's something that we've become accustomed to. And I can tell you, as an anxiety specialist and someone who has had anxiety my whole life, you really have to ground yourself in what you know is true in the moment. Because as a parent, we want to be able to reassure our kids that they are going to be safe all the time, that we can protect them, we can take care of them. And this is that one situation that is constantly in our face that reminds us that we can't, and that requires a lot of vulnerability. And when Carol was saying, anger, it's an easier emotion to feel, it is, because The other ones make you so vulnerable. You know, and anger is a powerful emotion. I think sometimes when we can't forgive, and I am going on in a tangent right now. When we can't forgive, when we hold on to the anger, what I found with clients who are going through grief and loss as well, when they let go of the anger, they feel like they almost let go of that person too. You know, they lose some of their connection and the intensity to whatever the situation and the person is.
Do you mean the victim loses the connection to the person that they've
Who
lost?
was lost.
Ah.
Yes, yes. So I think that too becomes difficult. I have many clients, I'm sure you have too, that said, I don't want to let go of the anger. I don't, because they feel like in some ways that is also vindication for that person, but it also creates so much toxicity inside them, preventing them from going on living their life in a healthy way.
You know, that's why we created the Samuel character, was to be our in to this story and to try to understand how the Amish community could forgive in the universal and almost immediate way that they did and do continue to. And you know, he absolutely embodies all the things that you just said. I mean, he has so many lines that he will not forget them. And for him, holding them like that grip without
Keeps
letting
her
go.
alive.
That, exactly, right. And that, so, I mean, that is, you know, the biggest message of the show. That
Nero, you spoke about school-aged kids and you know, they're being, I don't know, they're being exposed to this constantly, right? School-aged children hear and absorb the news about school shootings and gun violence on a daily basis through TV, the news, social media. This often results in children being afraid to do basic things like attend school. What is the best way to talk to your children about this topic in order for them not to live a life of fear?
So what's interesting is I think kids also, on some level, have become desensitized to it because it happens so often. And for my oldest, who's 15, she's had lockdown drills since kindergarten. So this has become a normal part of their life, and they expose it to them very gradually, initially saying that there's an animal in the building, you know, and then slowly their understanding changes as they change developmentally of it. But there is some sort of normalcy in this procedure. But when you have kids with anxiety, and now especially with the pandemic, we're seeing just such increased rates of anxiety in kids, adolescents, and adults, that's when it can become a trigger. And for kids who've been remote learning, we saw a huge jump in anxiety when they went back to school because now they had to face this issue. But in answer to your question, a couple things. Anytime you're talking with a child about what I say falls under the umbrella of the 3 S's, serious, scary, or sensitive material, you want to first start with where the child is. You want to find out what they know and what they're thinking and use open-ended questions. So tell me what you know about this. Tell me what you're feeling about this. Because oftentimes they've created a narrative that's based on their feelings, stories that they've heard from other kids, and there's discrepancies in that narrative, and we want to be able to give them the right information that they know. So you want to give them some space to talk. Whatever their feeling is, you want to validate that feeling. Well, of course, you know, this is scary. It's normal to feel scared. And then help them to understand their situation and how to feel safe in it. We do want to reassure them of their safety in the ways that we're capable of doing that. So to help them to understand that anytime this happens, the schools are assessing and they're figuring out how to keep them safe. We do these drills like we do in fire drills to keep them safe. They're grown-ups who are looking out for you. And also one thing, and it's really a very morbid way of thinking about it, but it's something that's really helped my clients and helped me as a parent, is to think about in all those places where this has happened, there have kids who have stayed safe. You know, because when, as a cognitive therapist, we think about probability, and when you're anxious, you go to the worst case scenario, but you try and also focus on the other scenarios that are possible. And just in terms of getting through this situation and going on with your life, that is a piece of it that's helpful to focus on.
That's great to hear. Thank you for that. Alexis, with your work with the Choose Love movement, I'm curious to know what your thoughts are after seeing the show today, specifically to the Amish community's quick and public forgiveness and compassion shown towards the shooter's family. But let's start with hearing a little bit more about Choose Love. What is this movement all about?
Thank you. Thank you for this amazing show, Andrew, for bringing attention to such an important topic it's very near and dear to us, the Choose Love movement. So we began after the Sandy Hook tragedy. Scarlett Lewis lost her son, Jesse. So talking about school shooting and tragedies is something that happens in our everyday work. But we know, unfortunately, as a society, we're quick to move on when we hear this, and we become desensitized. And bringing work like this to the public eye is so super important, because there's a lot to learn from this. And we learn through suffering and through pain. That's how we change as people and in society. And a few things that really stood out to me were, of course, the different stories of forgiveness, especially with Marion's father, that he couldn't move on. He was blaming himself. He couldn't forgive himself. I think that's something that we don't really talk about a lot, is that self-forgiveness, that, we're always kind of quick to forgive others. We want to, be a good person, but then we grapple with that inside ourselves. So that's really important. And another message that was underlying the whole show was hope. And I think hope is so important, and that's how we really can move on and learn from these horrible tragedies and pain that's unfortunately part of our world. So Choose Love, really, Scarlett Lewis again started after she lost her son, Jesse, and after she returned home, after a few weeks of being with her mom and with her family, she found a message on her kitchen chalkboard, which is really interesting since chalkboard, of course, was a big part of nickel mines. And on the chalkboard were the words written by Jesse in his handwriting and phonetically spelled, nurturing, healing, love. And these words were really not his vernacular. She really believes there was a spiritual awareness to him. And he left these words as a message to her and her family. And she utilized these words. She researched them. She worked with others in the field of compassion. And Dr. Chris Cook, who's researching compassion, worked with him on it, and it really became a formula for choosing love, which is courage, gratitude, forgiveness, and compassion. And now we have programming around these 4 elements that kids and adults can learn and practice, and it all goes back to really what choices we have. We can't choose what happens to us, but we can choose how we respond, and we can choose love when we have courage, gratitude, forgiveness, and compassion.
That's great. Carol, you're the executive director of an organization here in Ridgefield called Compassionate Ridgefield. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
So Compassionate Ridgefield was, designed to help foster greater compassion in the town of Ridgefield. Ridgefield's a very compassionate place, don't get me wrong. Lots of kindness going on in town. But there's also a lot of incivility and a lot of dismissiveness and a lot of alienation among different groups in town. And we just wanted to start to foster greater compassion in a world that is increasingly feeling very polarized and filled with hate and anger and tragedy. So that's it in a nutshell. There's a lot of other things I could say about it, but.
Yeah, no, and the work that you're doing is great.
Unfortunately in the Amish community, or not unfortunately, just the way that it is, the shunning is a big part of their culture, right? That God is above all else. I don't know if you remember in the scene where Barbie, Marion's sister, is praying at the table. She's praying to her sister, and her father corrects that fast, right? So at the end of the day, he loves his son, of course, but not more than God. That is that community's faith, whether we can understand it or not. And so we wanted to stay true to that. And, that is something that happens, especially after Rumspringas, when the, Amish youth go out and they go wild for a while and then come back. And sometimes they don't come back because they have had a piece of, our world and decide that they want to leave. And when that happens, the family oftentimes says, like, okay, we can't keep you tethered. If you choose this world over that world.
Really complicated. Yes, I saw a question. Yes.
What's been the Amish community's response to the show? Have they seen it? Did you get buy-in from the families, the Amish families?
Yeah, so we, that's a little bit of a complicated question. So when we were creating the show, we specifically did not go to the community because we wanted to keep a little distance for ourselves to be able to create it. It's an interpretive show, right? It's not a bio musical. We take real facts and then we present them in a way that felt right to us. So as we were creating it, we felt like we wanted that space to make sure that we could sort of flex our muscles in those ways, right? When we were doing the production at the festival in New York, I did an article for the Lancaster paper, which then got picked up by the ABC affiliate. And that sure sparked some Facebook messages and things like that of people saying like, you're profiting off of grief and whatever. And I would always respond right back, and we would have a conversation about it. Since then, a couple of our cast members, who I will not make come down today, I did the other day, actually went to nickel mines just like a week and a half ago or something. And they didn't meet any of the families directly affected by the shooting, but they met sort of the other families in the community. My co-author, Shannon Stokey, he just made a donation in the name of the show to an organization that still contributes all of the proceeds of this organization go to the ongoing care of the victims. So we're sort of like, we have like a toe in that community right now. And I think over time, it might grow a little bit deeper. To be honest, it's a little bit tricky for us to figure out how to do that, right? But from everything that I've heard, they are aware of it and interested by it. And I hear that there's appreciation, but again, I'm not really sort of going into the community and asking for that, just kind of allowing it.
Yes, this is centered around a terrible event that happened in 2006 in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, but the story is ultimately one about forgiveness and community, a message of hope. And so, everybody's going to have their opinions, including the Amish community and others. So, I mean, this is the great thing about theater. We're able to present these types of things in sort of interpretive and creative ways.
We present what happened in our way, but we don't sort of come out against gun violence. We don't come out for the shooter's family or for the victims. We just sort of say, this is what it is. You decide how you feel, right? And that's how I like to be an audience member or a viewer of art or music or whatever. I don't like to be told, take this away. I'd rather make that decision myself.
Anita D'Onofrio is on Zoom, as I said. Anita, I'm curious for the audience to hear why you decided, I mean, I know why, but why you decided to fund this and to let us bring this amazing story back.
So you asked me, you told me about nickel mines a little bit and said, would you be willing to help us? And at first, my first thought was a musical about a shooting. And, I said I have to think about it. I saw as many clips as I could. If ever, even though we got shut down in 2020, if ever we need it more today. Because, this issue is not going away. And I think this play, as you can see, is bringing a dialogue, maybe in a different way that has happened before. The arts are amazingly important. I wouldn't have thought, how could the arts help us? But I think this is an amazing venue to present a beautifully done play like Nickel Mines. And I'm so proud of everybody. I'm proud of ACT for taking it on. I'm proud of Andrew for doing it. I know that he cares very much about this issue. So I guess that's how I got involved.
Yeah, and we thank you. We would not have been able to do this without her.
I think one of the other real benefits of the show is that it does get us to think about the shooter. What are we doing in our culture that we're creating, usually boys, alienated boys, who are then going out and expressing all their rage in this way? Like, what can we as a society, as a world, do to change that? And how do we help those boys, often boys, feel more connected to caring people and a humanity that will embrace them and help them instead of, anyway, you get my point.
And that's, the beauty of the work that y'all are doing, like the creating, working with compassion and anxiety and all the things that we struggle with on a daily basis. You're 100% right. If that goes in early, hopefully less of this happens.
Yeah.
Any final questions?
Yeah, but I just want to tell you this was a very powerful afternoon.
I'm so glad.
Thank you so much.
For participating.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I got to tell you, we have the best patrons, audiences here at this theater, and I'm just so grateful for you guys supporting theater, supporting the arts, and supporting new works like this. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, everybody.
And we'll see you again soon.